my name is Warren Eagles and I'm a colourist based in Australia. I live in Brisbane. I got into the industry a long time ago. When I left school, I started working in photography, which is just a couple of 100 metres from where we are now. We're sitting here in Dalby, inside Square. And I was an assistant. So this was 2.25 photography, 35mm, or big 10:8 plate shots photography. And I just used to load the film, move the lights for the photographer, do whatever he needed to do. But at the time, I really loved that job, and it was really good when you were 17. We were working on sets and working with models. It was a great job, but I wanted to be a director or a DP. So I left there and went to work in film cutting rooms, set up film cutting room equipment. I worked as a projectionist. Again, moved all over London setting up kit. I learned basic film editing. Again, I enjoyed the job, but I wasn't becoming a director. Thought I'd go to a post house. Worked at a place that was probably 100 metres the other way from where we are now in London, called Visions. Started there as a runner, gopher. Generally worked my way up, and a colourist left. And the guy who worked there, Clark Muller, who's now got his own shop in Venice in LA, he said, well, I'll train you if you want to be a colourist. I thought, well, I could be a colourist for a while. It's a step up. I'm a little bit nearer being a director. That was like 25, 26 years ago, and I'm still doing it. Never directed, but I'd like to one day. It's changed a lot, and I think that's one of the reasons why I'm still interested in it, because when I started back then, we'd only just started to put negative film onto a telecine machine. There was no digital grading, so nobody graded digital. It was all film, and a lot of the commercials were actually graded in the lab by a digital lab timer, and they would come to us, and they were sort of already graded from the print. We'd load the print on the machine and just go through and change things slightly. Then negatives started to be put on a telecine machine where we really could change things a lot more. Things like music videos, a lot of those big music videos out of the 80s, a lot of those looks were driven through a colorist suite. But having said that, we couldn't zoom the image too much. We had no real secondaries to be able to change colors independently. We certainly had no windows, shapes, so it was more primitive grading. But I think the art of how you balanced the picture was the same. And that's the truth of anything we do now. If you can get that picture balanced, then it's such a good starting point for anything else that you do. From those early days, obviously the software always slightly evolved. Every year, couple of years, you get new hardware, maybe new software. We could then do more shapes. We could then draw our own shape. Then we got things like trackers, where we could track people's faces or track a car. All those things it's like adding to our arsenal of tools that we can use as a grader, which then made it more interesting. You had to learn more, but you could do more, so you could always offer up more to the client. Say, I can do that for you. Don't go to this VFX room. We can do that. We can draw a shape, bring up the skin tone, soften the skin, bring up the eyes. So that's why it's always been interesting. I find it really depends on who you're working with. Now, the more you work with a director or DP, you tend to be on the same wavelength, if you like. It's why a lot of DPs work with the same director or the same way around. I can sometimes notice just by working with someone, just maybe for a few hours, what they are going to like. In terms of trying to implant my signature look maybe on a job, no, I probably wouldn't do that. I take every job as it comes in and say, right, this is the way I think it should look. And I always try and offer up something, even if a director's got a definite opinion of how they want it to be. I feel it's always the job of the colorist to add that creative input of what I think will help sell their product. And this is whether it's a commercial, obviously commercials have got products, music videos got a product, that's the person, that's the lead singer, and a feature, it's always the talent. It's always your hero actresses. So whatever I'm going to do, I'm just a part of that whole team that's trying to sell the story. So there's right ways and there's right times to offer up certain styles, and it's just probably about recognizing that. I think that the fundamentals far is definitely the most important thing. I say to people when I'm running classes that learning the software is the easy bit. You know, we can learn the software whether you come to one of my classes, you learn it online, you read a book, you can play around and learn basically what the tools do. And most of these software packages now, they all do pretty much the same thing. They do it in a slightly different way. Some are easier to use, some are a bit more user friendly, some are a bit more difficult to use, but being able to balance the shot and understanding the colour and what you can do is the hard thing. That's what takes time. So the answer to your question, yeah, I'd say definitely the colour part of it is the hard part. So people I notice in my training, people who come from like a photography background, DP background, an artist background. I had someone that came on my class in LA. She was an editor, reality TV editor. Every little task I gave her to do, she made a really good picture nearly every time. I thought this girl was really good. She just was cutting reality. Second day, again, she made it. I said, you know, you're making some really good things here. Well, she said, oh, I've got a degree in fine art and I'm an artist. And I just thought, yeah, I could see. Because you just knew she could just get everything just look right. And she'd add a little touch to it. And that's something that is sort of quite hard to teach. You learn that and that becomes experience. Whereas the software, some people pick it up really quickly. Doesn't mean to say they're a colorist. Same as editing or shooting or anything. It takes time. I'm currently in London running a colorist class at Dolby. So we're in Dolby HQ here in Soho. I generally travel to the US a couple of times a year, come here once a year and go to Singapore 4 times a year running colorist classes. At the moment I'm teaching Resolve 12, but I'm not always teaching the software. We're trying to teach why you do things and why you use a shape or why you use a secondary. It's not necessarily just about I'm teaching you the software. I'm trying to impart general knowledge as well. So it's like a colorist strategies class, but it is using Resolve. So it's a big thanks to Dolby for giving us the room and supporting training. You know, it's good that manufacturers are looking at training, trying to invest in the future because they are obviously potential customers to any software manufacturers or hardware, like the guys who make monitors and the guys who make cameras. So for me, it's still a very exciting time to be in color correction. And the training side of it really supplements my grading side because in the training, I get to talk to so many people that are showing me things. That's also inspiring me into doing things. Then I go back home and I start working on a movie or a big commercial, then I'm picking up ideas that I've got from the classes. And obviously, if I'm teaching the software, I have to know it. So I have to get in there and find out all these new things in the software. So the two, I think, supplement each other really well, which I find interesting. I probably, I'm not a huge art fan. You know, if I'm in a town, maybe I will go into a gallery and look at some things. One thing I try and do, it's been a bit hard because I've had young kids. Now my kids are a bit older. Every month I try and see a classic film that I've not seen before. And I try and go back and, if I'm not seeing it, I'm obviously engaged in the story, but I'm trying to look at some of the techniques that were used, some of the techniques they used in shooting it, maybe lighting it, maybe how it was graded. And I try and get influences from there. That's from a movie side of things, but just generally keeping up with trends and just, I think, opening your eyes when you're around. I'm a firm believer of we can't grade something in a certain way if we've not been there or experienced it. Hustle and bustle of cities or quiet calm of just islands or beaches and things like that. Because if we've experienced it, we really get to know how that feels. So just by traveling around and going to different places just gives you experience which you can offer up. I go around and I might take to a job a monitor, I might take a panel, but I will take my own little film library of looks. And not only are they like presets that I can use, there's a bank of stills from, say, famous movies. I may even take little QuickTime sections. So if a director says, well, I'm really not sure where this can go, I can say, well, I've got some reference movies. Let's cut up and look at a few films. Let's look at some stills, and we can maybe narrow down what we both think will work. Because sometimes people really don't have any idea. They say, just show me some things. So if you've already got a bank of presets of things you've worked or some new looks, you can go, well, let's try this. No director I've ever worked with has ever looked negatively at the fact you've tried to do something. Even if it's not right, they might say, well, I don't think it suits this campaign, but I like what you're thinking, and that could really work for my next film. So never be afraid of trying things. But then it's a thin line, because you don't want to try too many things and go, well, let's do this, do this, because that will just maybe confuse the guys in your room. I always maybe offer up 3 things that I think could work, and then none of them might not even get used. But if we're slightly new and inventive and is a little bit different, then hopefully the one that you pick is the one they like, because that's what you want. You want a director to walk out of your room and go, well, that's actually graded slightly different to how I thought it was going to be. That's nice. That has added something. And as a colorist, you've got to be adding value to that project, because if not, then they'll probably be maybe looking for someone else for the next one. Or, as we're seeing now with cheaper software, they can maybe do it themselves. So you've really got to add value in there to justify why they're bringing you on board. And that's not just because you can conform the shots and say balancing a GoPro to a red shot. They assume you can do that. You want to take it just a little bit more and really make that campaign stand out, or that scene in the movie that's extra scary, or you're trying to subtly move the viewer into the film. A bit like you do with music, how music really changes the whole vibe of a film. Then subtle little grading changes can do that as well with the colour. And that's what I find really interesting. Given the choice, I'd always like to have the people in the room, because that's how you build relationships. If you can compare a session that's, say, done remotely to a session where you have a couple of clients, if I offer up a grade in my room and the director's there, and the director might go, yeah, it's all right, I can tell whether they really like it or not. They might just say yes because the producer's there and maybe they have to move on, but you can look at them and really interact, and you can vibe, get a feeling whether they like it. But obviously if they're working remotely and you're sending them versions, they're not in your room, so you don't pick that up. So you do what you think, you mail that off, and they give you some comments back. You change it, send it back. So you can do this, and we have to be able to do this now, because this is how the grading industry is changing. People are sending me stuff from all over. But if they are sitting there, you instantly know whether they like it or not. So I still always favour them there. And my tip to anyone is, even if they're in the room with you, a lot of the times they're not always concentrating on what you're doing. Don't assume they are looking at what you're doing. Sometimes they'll be on their laptops, or they'll say, look, this is what I've done. I've done you a couple, can we just look at this and lock this down? And they come to the front of the room and they'll look at it, and that way they'll go, yes, I like it, or no, I think it could be slightly different. Favorite codec? It's a good question. There's, I'll maybe change it slightly. The question is, there's a bit of a backlash in grading log images, I found. So a log image will come from 5 or so cameras now. Even the GoPros are trying to give you this thing called ProTune, where you have a log image, and think of it, it looks a bit flatter. We are holding on to highlight and black information, and there's no built-in gamma curve from the camera. So initially it doesn't look so good. It looks a bit flat. And some producers have been saying, well, why can't we just shoot in like Rec 709 like we used to on digital Betacam or a Sony 900, and then we just tweak the colour a bit. We don't have to go and get a colorist. We don't have to grade everything. Now, there's a few reasons why that probably worked 5 or so years ago and why it doesn't work now. Traditionally, back then, maybe your program was only shot with one camera. So you may have only had one HD Sony 900 camera. I would think back then we maybe had a bit more time than we do now. DP set maybe lit it a bit better. Things didn't need to be matched as much, so you could maybe get away without a colorist. Now though, I can't remember the last time I graded a job that was shot on just one camera. There might be a red mixed with a 5D. Hopefully maybe mixed with, say, a Blackmagic. There might be a GoPro in there. It might be red and a Sony. And now if you're then shooting in the log profile as a colorist, you've got much more chance of matching it and it all looks seamless. But if all those cameras are in like a Rec 709 and the look is baked in, we're really going to fight to make it work. So I can understand their point. They don't necessarily want to grade everything, but you've got the choice. All these cameras have the choice to shoot either way. It's 709 a log, and it's up to the producers and the DP and the director working out what best suits. But certainly for me, I would rather think in a log process. I don't mind grading ProRes. If things in log and it's in ProRes and it's in ProRes 444, good. A lot of the stuff I do ProRes 422 HQ. I'll also use these new MXF DNX HD codecs. I'm seeing a little bit less DPX. Obviously, I would say if you could grade the original camera files as a colorist, then that's always going to be the best quality you're going to get, rather than grading some sort of transcoded version. So, but there's so many of them now. My again, advice to anybody is just try and understand them a bit. Fuji was always a bit different from Kodak, but we learned that. Once we learned and we knew not stock we were putting on our machine, it made us grade a certain way. Same with these codecs now and all these different cameras. And we're seeing cameras new all the time, aren't we? If you can understand where they are, what they're good at, then you're going to be a better grader just by knowing that. So my take on ASUS, and in Australia this is getting used slowly, it's getting picked up. And it's certainly good in taking these different raw formats. So if we've got 3 cameras that are shot and they're in our commercial, say, or our film, and we want to get them to behave very similar rather than their individual C-Log or Red Log film or Alexa Log C, then that's where ASUS is coming in. Where I find it slightly, it's getting everybody to be on that page, like the VFX people, getting them to work in, say, an EXR workflow that's in ASUS space and not their usual DPX workflow. That's where it's becoming a little bit harder to get everyone there. But I think we're moving slowly. The awareness is going to be there, and certainly as we move towards, high dynamic range, Rec 2020, wider color spaces and gamuts and things, that's where I think ASUS will then come in to its own. I mean, Baselight can do this where it has, individual color management for each clips, timeline managements. You can then go out in a certain color space. DaVinci are just bringing this in version 12, where you've got input, output color management on clips and different cameras, which means you don't need to utify LUTs. So that's a form of ASUS as well that they're bringing in. So it's all moving in a good way, I think. It's just slowly. A lot of people like to work the way they've worked. They're doing the job, they're getting paid. Why would we need to change into a different way of working? So that might be the only difference I see. As somebody coming into color correction for a new colorist, I would say it's not so easy, because how I started, I trained with 2 colorists and they were doing top end stuff, commercials, gone on to do long form. I then half trained with another guy, and wherever I went there was someone there you could talk to and you could ask them questions. You could always sit over their shoulder. Even if I'd been grading a while, I might go into their room, drop in, we chat about things, they'd show me something, I'd show them something, and I might work in a shop where there was 3 senior colorists, and we'd all share ideas. And now it's much more like there's one guy in a small little shop, and you are the person, but you've got no one to bounce any ideas around. There's not the come up apprenticeship type model where you can sit with someone and mentor off them. So that's harder. Though obviously the software is cheaper, the machines are cheaper, it's easier to get into. But I think that's where our ICA colorist training has sort of come on, because people realise there's this need to further their knowledge, and you can only get so far of sitting watching the DVD or doing online training. You want to go to a class and have your list of questions. Somebody like myself or one of our other guys will put you through little lessons and get you to do things, and then they will come and look and say, well, you could do it that way, but probably try doing it this way. Use this tool. Then I'd leave them and they'd balance up something, and you can sort of critique their work. So definitely someone's coming up. Take a look at training options. It's not a lot of money if you are intending to bill in the future and that's what you want to do. You are investing in your future, and the classes are tax deductible. Another bit of advice to someone coming through is try and sort of get your own take on things, or your own, not necessarily your own style and way you grade things, because we can't just have one style. Well, I know, this person graded that because it looks a certain way, but know what you like as a person. Get some individualism about what you do, and I like that magazine shot because it looks a certain way, or that big poster or that commercial looks good because of this. Because that way you have an opinion. So if someone comes and asks you in your room, what do you think? What do you like? You can offer up and say, well, I like this. Or I like the style from this director, or I like that big billboard campaign that we're seeing at the moment because it looks a certain way. And that way it means you are thinking about things all the time, and you're getting an eye. They say you got an eye for colour, but you've got an eye for what you like and maybe you don't like. So that's another key thing when you're coming up. And that's why artists and, say, photographers or retouchers, they've been doing that. They've been doing that in their photography, their retouching, in their painting. Anything that they've done that's creative, they've been doing that. They've just got to transform those skills into moving pictures, like what a colorist does. They marry that creative side they've got into the technical side of learning the software and things that you do, and that's what goes on to being a better colorist, which is a mixture, obviously, creative, technical, and probably being able to run a room as well if you've got some people in your room.